Welcome and good morning. And I'm so glad that many of you could join virtually us on the Zoom for the St. Louis Regional Chamber's COVID-19 briefing on Missouri's major metro cities. As the state of Missouri begins to reopen, it's important that our two largest metro areas, Kansas City and St. Louis, coordinate and share strategies that give our businesses and communities the best guidance to open safely and confidently. While we hope that the peak is behind us, the fight against the COVID-19 is far from over, and the steps we take now will provide a good foundation for our region and the state's recovery. I would also like to thank our healthcare and other essential workers who are on the front lines during the COVID-19 pandemic. Again, I'm Tom Chulick, President and CEO of the St. Louis Regional Chamber. And today, I'm very excited that we have four tremendous speakers who will share ideas and ongoing COVID-19 relief efforts between Missouri's metropolitan regions. To begin our briefing, Missouri State Representative Derek Grier will give a General Assembly update. Then St. Louis Mayor Lyda Krewson and Kansas City Mayor Quinton Lucas will give an update on their cities and their government's efforts relating to reopening and relief. Following their briefings, Joe Reardon, who's a longtime friend of St. Louis and president of and CEO of the Greater Kansas City Chamber of Commerce, will discuss the situation in the Kansas City region and the Chamber's efforts to abate this economic and healthcare crisis. After Joe, you'll hear from me, and I'll be discussing the Regional Chamber's relief efforts and what we're doing to help with our region and help our region reopen. I'd like to thank all of our speakers for taking time to join our virtual meeting this morning and for their continued support of Missouri and the St. Louis region. And now, I would like to pass the baton to Austin Walker, Vice President of Public Policy and the Regional Chamber. Austin?
Thanks, Tom, and thanks everybody participating on the call today. If you have a question you'd like answered by any of our speakers, please just use the chat feature in Zoom and we'll do our best to get to your questions. I'd also like to take this time to thank our St. Louis Regional Chamber 2020 public policy sponsors. Their contributions support all of our policy programming throughout the year. We couldn't do this without them. And before we get started, there have been some exciting recent developments on one of the Regional Chamber's top priorities in the Missouri General Assembly. This is HB 2046, and we wanted to give the business community a quick update, and we are fortunate to have House Economic Development Chairman Derek Grier here with us this morning, live on video and sporting what I assume is a tremendous quarantine beard, very sharp indeed. Missouri State Representative Derek Grier represents St. Louis County, parts of Chesterfield, Baldwin, Winchester, and Town and Country, and was elected to his first two-year term in November 2016. Chairman of the House Economic Development Committee, is a recipient of the Regional Chamber's Chamber Champion Award for his work last year on Senate Bill 68. This year, Representative Grier sponsored House Bill 2046, Occupational Licensing Reciprocity, a top workforce priority for the Chamber, and last week, this bill passed the Missouri Senate and included with it two additional Chamber priorities. That's the Fresh Start Act and Expanded Workforce Act. And it's just one more vote to go to get to the governor's desk. Representative Grier has been a friend of the Chamber since his time in office and is laser focused on economic and workforce development in Missouri. Please welcome Representative Derek Grier.
Hey, thank you, Austin. Really appreciate it. And really pleased to be here with you all. I'll give you a little update on what's going on here, particularly with House Bill 2046. As chair of the Economic Development Committee, I mean, we're constantly looking at ways to help grow our economy, to help particularly the economic engines of our region. I know we have a lot of folks from the St. Louis and Kansas City area on the call, and certainly in the times that we're in right now, we're looking for ways that we can help restart the economy as quickly as possible, help people get back to work as quickly as possible. And 2046 really gets to the heart of that and helps open up our workforce, allow for greater workforce mobility is one of the primary goals of it. And it's really, designed to allow folks to access work and to fill a lot of the skilled jobs that we have in our state. And it does that through a number of different ways. The bill has grown from its original concept, which was really just addressing license reciprocity and licensing recognition. And it has grown to also include some initiatives called the Fresh Start Act and the Expanded Workforce Act. The license reciprocity piece of it, the goal there is to make it easier for people to travel from state to state and use the skills that they have. So if you have a professional license in another state and you have been practicing there and you're in good standing, we want you to come to Missouri, and we want you to add to our workforce here and fill the jobs that we have, and allow for you to plug in. And so that's what the license reciprocity piece does. It allows people to move those skills from state to state, because you don't lose your skills when you go from Illinois to Missouri to work in Missouri. You don't lose the skills that you have. And so we want you to be able to transfer those down and provide a Missouri license to you so that you can get to work and plug in right away and break down some of those barriers to entry. The Fresh Start Act, that is also included in House Bill 2046 now. That was sponsored by Senator Andrew Koenig in the Senate. And that bill particularly deals with giving former folks that have been incarcerated, prior offenders, the opportunity to get a license and not be arbitrarily banned from working in a profession that they may be able to contribute quite a bit to. Cosmetology is a great example. A lot of the prisons that we have programs to educate people, to get them the skills, and then once they get out of prison and are integrating back into our society, we want them to be able to be productive citizens and give them the tools they need and not arbitrarily prohibit them from entering into a career that could be very productive for them. The third piece of 2046 that's important to note for you all is the Expanded Workforce Act. And the Expanded Workforce Act really deals with apprenticeships. So it deals with the access to apprenticeships and then those apprenticeships leading to occupational licenses. So the United States government, we have over 60,000 apprenticeship programs that are approved by the Department of Labor. And in Missouri, we want to recognize more of those programs and allow those programs to translate into the license that you need and the government permission that you need to work. So that's really the update on 2046. I'm happy to answer any questions that you have, but we are very focused right now in the legislature on getting this and a number of other initiatives across the line that specifically deal with the COVID crisis that we have now, and really restarting the economy has kind of been my focus.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for your update. Really appreciate that. The Chamber, obviously, we're a huge proponent of your bill. We look forward to its passage, hopefully this week. And just real quick, for the folks on the call, are there any other workforce or economic development bills being debated in the General Assembly that would help businesses during and after the pandemic?
There are some. We're looking at, as a conservative legislature, we're attacking it from a number of different approaches. We're bipartisan. I don't mean to say that it's all conservative, but the initiatives that we're looking at, some of them have to deal with easing the tax burden on individuals and on corporations so that they can, again, restart as quickly as possible. A lot of people are dealing with a lot of challenges and obligations that they have here, for ways to do that. And we do have a number of bills that specifically target that. I know a number of them are part of your initiatives as well and your priorities. But yes, there are some others. I'm focused on the 2046 right now, but there are a number of other initiatives that we have that I may think of before the end of the call here.
Well, Representative, thank you very much. Yeah, no, those three components of that bill, 2046, are three of our top priorities here at the Regional Chamber. They have been all sessions, so we really appreciate your hard work there in the General Assembly. Hopefully we can see some success here in the House this week and get this thing done. But thank you very much for being on the call today and joining our members.
You're welcome. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you. You bet. Now turning to our next guest, and I love the St. Louis, Kansas City theme for today's webinar. St. Louis Mayor Lyda Krewson was elected to office in April of 2017. Prior to the election, Mayor Krewson served as the city's 28th Ward Alderwoman. As mayor, Krewson is focused intently on public safety, mental health, and increasing workforce and economic development opportunities. I'd like to thank Mayor Krewson for participating in an earlier COVID-19 briefing with regional leadership and for being here with us today. Please welcome the Honorable Mayor Lyda Krewson.
Sorry, I was muted. First world problems. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for having me on this call with you this morning. And I do want to say welcome to Mayor Quinton Lucas. I don't know if he's on yet, but he's been a great partner to work with on the other side of the state, and just so pleased to be able to have that relationship and that collaboration. So thank you for having me on this morning. Riley, are you, I have some questions from you. Do you want me to launch right into it, or you want to pose the questions?
Mayor, I think you can go ahead. Floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much. So, you know, the biggest thing on everyone's mind right now is, of course, COVID-19, and when and how and under what conditions can we reopen business. So you all know that yesterday the state of Missouri opened most businesses, although they have respected the decisions in both St. Louis and Kansas City to stay at home for a little while longer. In our region here in St. Louis, County Executive Sam Page and I are working very closely together in order to come up with one set of guidelines, one date, and to make the communication for this between city and county businesses much easier. We know that communication is a big challenge already as we try to communicate with people about COVID-19, what we recommend they do, what we not recommend that they do. So we're working together very hard on that. We are expecting in the next mid-May, which is only a week and a half or two away here, we are expecting to be able to open many businesses under some conditions, which will mean social distancing, probably mask wearing, and some of those kinds of things. We know that this has been devastating for business, and when it's devastating for business, it's devastating for employees as well. So as we look at the health considerations, which are certainly many, 68,000 people in the United States have died from COVID-19. That was yesterday's number. That's more people than died in the entire Vietnam War, for any of you as old as I am to be able to remember that. So at any rate, it is a very serious situation for both the health aspect, but also for the business aspect. So we're hoping within the next few days to have an announcement and to have some guidelines in place. We're still evolving those guidelines as we all try to work through that. I know many of you're running your own businesses, and you probably can write those guidelines much better than those of us that are not working in your industries. So we've been working with some business groups and really appreciate your help on that. I'm happy to take questions, or Riley.
Thanks, Mayor. This is Austin.
Austin, oh, I'm sorry. I see Riley up here on my screen. I don't see you, Austin.
Well, Riley runs the show, so
I see. Okay, right, I got it.
Just have a couple questions. Hi, Mayor. Thank you for being with us. So you said that you're working with St. Louis County on reopening the regional economy, and that announcement, you know, could come this week about what could come. What kinds of markers are you using to determine when you might reopen St. Louis for business, and what kind of input are you getting from the business community?
Well, quite honestly, what we thought we would have in terms of markers, we just don't have, because we still don't have widespread testing. But what we are looking at are a couple of things. One, a decrease in the number of new cases, taking into account the number of tests that are administered. The second thing, and really the thing that is more of a true, is how many people are in the hospital, how many people are in ICU beds, how many people on ventilators. So looking for a downward trend in that as well, because we know that while, of course, if you're in the hospital, that's a lagging indicator. However, it is, when we're seeing those cases go down somewhat, we're encouraged that we may be able to open for business sooner rather than later. We have, through the good work of all your businesses, your families, the residents in our community, we have tamped down the spread of COVID-19. Although there's still a lot of cases. You know, our region has about 2/3 of the cases in the entire state. So that's why one size doesn't fit all here. But so we are continuing to look at those markers, and hopefully we're really trying not to have a severe second wave of this. We know there will likely be some second wave, but really trying to do this in an eased in way so that there's not a big second wave.
So the regional chamber is really happy to see the close collaboration with other parts of our region, other counties. Specifically, you mentioned with County Executive Page, who's been doing a great job, as well as his team over there in the county, as has yours. And you mentioned testing. We've heard a lot about that from political and business leaders, that upscaling testing is the recipe for reopening up the economy. So what steps is St. Louis taking to increase testing? And will we see more before reopening the St. Louis economy?
Well, testing has been easing in a little bit, but we don't have nearly enough tests. And that's true across the country. There's nothing unique about us. We are expecting that, you know, the supply side of this is somewhat kicking in, and will continue to do that. So we will have more testing. We need to be able to test vulnerable populations. We need to be able to test first responders. Of course, older people in nursing homes, that would be a vulnerable population. And we need to be able to test everybody who is symptomatic in any way. Now, the difficulty with that is we know that a fairly substantial portion of the positives are asymptomatic or don't have symptoms. But if we have, the city of St. Louis itself has 220,000 tests on order. We have had 20,000 on order since the end of March, and the other couple 100,000 on order for several weeks. And we haven't received those yet. We are getting some tests from the state. That's how we're supplying the federally qualified health centers. And of course, hospitals have tests because it's about having the components of the test, the swabs, the reagents, the ability to actually process the test. So it's a challenging situation. We all know that. You can't turn on the national news at night without hearing about testing, and St. Louis is no different.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, I want to say that you and your team have done a really good job about articulating the needs of, you know, small businesses. You're hearing from them, as are we, and the concerns for, you know, real businesses out there that are trying to open up. They've been hurt pretty badly, as you know, and it's kind of hard to talk about a second spike. You mentioned that.
Right.
And we have to consider that as a realistic possibility. Is the city preparing for that, and how might we approach that?
Well, we are preparing for that in as best we can, but the preparing for it means testing, and it means contact tracing. And, you know, you all know this, there is no, at this point in time, there's no vaccine for it, and there's no real medical treatment for it. I mean, we have a couple of hopeful things on the horizon, but if we get a second spike, really the only thing that we have to tamp that down is a change in behavior. And no one wants to go back through the pain of another stay-at-home order. I don't, and I know none of your businesses do either. We are now in week 7 of a stay-at-home order in St. Louis City and St. Louis County. That's a long time. And we also know there are a lot of people going to work because they're in essential businesses. Our grocery store workers, our healthcare workers, people who pick up your trash, police, fire, dispatchers, airport, all those folks are still going to work. So no one wants to go through this again. And so that's why it's important, I think, to ease into this. The doctors tell us that we will see somewhat of a second spike. That is almost inevitable, but we are trying to keep that as low as possible. We even saw a little spike after Easter a few weeks ago, when maybe, you know, some folks were not quite as diligent about staying home and not being together. So we even saw a little spike there that we're attributing or thinking is probably due to Easter. So it's a very tough situation because the only medicine is this, you know, changing of our behavior, and that's very tough.
Well, Mayor, we appreciate everything you're doing, and we really appreciate what our public health officials are doing. The business community is going to be depending on them pretty heavily in the coming weeks and months to help keep us all safe, and we appreciate the partnership and you listening to the concerns of the business community as we all try to move through this thing together. So appreciate you being here for our members and joining us today.
Austin.
Thank you, Mayor.
Hi to Mayor Quinton Lucas.
Speaking of Mayor Quinton Lucas, now joining us would be the mayor of Kansas City. Mayor Lucas was sworn in as the 55th mayor of Kansas City on August 1st, 2019. As mayor, he's focused on creating more accessible and affordable housing and transportation and making Kansas City's neighborhoods safer. Please welcome the Honorable Mayor Quinton Lucas.
Hey, everybody. It is good to talk to you today from Western Missouri, and it is always an honor to hear my friend Mayor Lyda Krewson. Mayor for about 10 months now, although who's keeping track? I've had a full parade and championship. We've had positive times, but certainly we're dealing with this challenge significantly as well. I wanted to talk to you a little bit about some of the cross-state cooperation I've had both with Mayor Krewson, County Executive Page, but also the Governor of Missouri. The first thing that Lyda noted, I think, is important, which is that we have the fact Governor Parson has not elected to preempt the ability of cities and regions to address issues that are facing us during the COVID crisis. I watched the reports. I know that there is an incredible number of infections in St. Louis, the city, and the county. Kansas City has not been hit as hard ever. We have an ever-increasing threat with our meatpacking plant right up the road that has a number of cases. Hundreds of those employees live actually in Kansas City. So we're trying to do as much testing as possible. In Kansas City, we also have you all by state region, which in some ways is a challenge, it's a blessing. What that means is we have a lot of different rules, a lot of different orders that we're trying to make it kind of clear, which is that no one wants to see us have to shut down again. No one wants to create a situation in which any of our communities become kind of national known as an area of high infections. I think of New Orleans and Detroit as examples. Of course, we all know in New York metropolitan area. So we are still trying to be conservative for what reopening looks like. In Kansas City, we have set dates for when reopening occurs. Broadly, everything, I say everything, but most things will open on May 15th. So we're 10 days away there. We have what we call a soft opening in Kansas City, i.e. starting tomorrow. Low traffic types of organizations and operations, your office buildings, those sorts of things, where the public doesn't actually tend to come in much, where isn't much interaction between customers and providers of services. Will be opening starting tomorrow. A 6-foot social distancing is required in connection with it along the way. A few things that keep me up at night during this phase. One, there are challenges. I saw a question from Mayor Krewson, CARES Act funding. That is something that we're trying to look at here as well. What are the best ways for us to leverage those dollars in Kansas City? We have created a small business emergency relief fund that is hoping to get these CARES Act dollars to provide some lending assistance to those smaller businesses that have been negatively impacted over the last couple of weeks, those that are having trouble surviving. So that's one area for us. Another area that we have been working on is how we can increase our testing and our tracing capabilities. We all recognize that the future of COVID is largely us finding a way to live with it. To talk about living with COVID, we have to realize that tracers are essential for stopping an outbreak, seeing who has been exposed, and from there, actually making sure those people go on and get tested. Currently, Kansas City, Missouri probably needs about 140 effort tracers. We have about 30. This is going to be the sort of work, the sort of improvement that we need to really try to address this issue long term. A few other things, and I'll pause for questions. I was on a call with our Commission and Visitor Bureau today, which God love them. They asked, another large hotel owners had asked, when will you promulgate specific guidelines for our reopening? And I said, well, that's kind of like, planning for something in the future. We're trying to, for businesses, create as many guidelines as possible, but also understanding that there is just far more that will need to go along the way. And so that is probably my next step in terms of looking at industry-specific sectors, what are best practices, seeing how we integrate that into Kansas City's long-term response. With that, I'll pause for any questions that you might have.
Mr. Mayor, thank you. This is Austin, and I think we're working on a little bit of audio issue that should be getting, it sounded like it was getting a little bit better on your end. I want to start by thanking you for being here this morning. And last week, you announced Kansas City's phased reopening plan. And the heart of that plan is the 10-10-10 rule. Can you explain the role and why you and the health department think it'll keep businesses open and the people
Yeah.
of Kansas City safe?
Yes, so we decided to separate businesses in a few different ways, and I apologize for the internet. It happens that way. One is essential businesses are obviously open. Non-essential businesses are of two different types. Ones that have regular customer traffic, your restaurant or your bars, and there are those that do not. Our view was under this plan that we were going to actually create a process by which we have 10% capacity, which relates to a state guideline from Missouri, or 10 people in smaller establishments, or if you're there and see it for more than 10 minutes, keeping reservations, appointments, that sort of thing. And so the effort for us was to say, how do we actually institute this and have 10-10 be our guidance in the short term, and then we would look at probably increase to a 25% standard, going to a 50% standard, and so on. The reason that we chose this approach was to say that as we reopen, this gives us an opportunity to have real metrics. And so we say, all right, we did a step one of reopening. Let's take a look with our look at how many cases and new infections we have, how many issues we have there. And so that is what we are trying to do long term. So that's what the 10-10-10 program looks like. Another thing that I think we're trying to do is to make sure that we have collaboration with business. So while we created our 10-10-10 rule, I continue to meet with our restaurant industry and so many others that can help us address these issues long term.
Thank you, Mayor. And it sounded like the audio was going to start working again, and then it started cutting a little out at the end. We do have just a couple more questions for you. Perhaps could we reset and get back in just a couple minutes?
Sure, that works for me.
Awesome. Thank you. So while we're actually resetting, I want to pass it on to President and CEO of the Greater Kansas City Chamber of Commerce, Joe Reardon. Joe has served as the President and CEO of the Chamber since January of 2016. And prior to his role with the Greater Kansas City Chamber of Commerce, Joe is the Mayor of Kansas City, Kansas from 2005 to 2013. So please welcome a good friend of the Chamber, President Reardon.
Thank you very much, Austin. I appreciate it. Hopefully the audio on my end is okay for everyone. I really, and I want to say hello to Tom too, and everyone in St. Louis, and it's great to see Mayor Lucas on this joint effort. Thanks to the St. Louis Chamber for putting this together. I thought I'd give you just a real quick update on where we've been as a chamber, and then what we're doing sort of real time in Kansas City to support businesses as we're looking at reopening. As everyone on this Zoom knows, the Kansas City metro area has been greatly impacted by the virus. Early on, our chamber spent time advocating directly with our congressional partners for the CARES Act and PPP. And then we spent a lot of time working with individual businesses to get them through that process. We've experienced in Kansas City that banks have been stressed and overwhelmed by the amount of small businesses that are looking to access PPP, and we've been very aware of that. Having said that, Missouri has been really successful in accessing those dollars, both on the Kansas City and St. Louis side, and I think that bodes well for the great coordination and collaboration that we have in our communities relative to accessing those federal dollars. We've also been advocating alongside Kansas City, Missouri, to say that the city of Kansas City, Missouri ought to qualify for direct federal access to funds. And of course, you know, there was this 500,000 person population limit that was the threshold to get direct access to federal funds. We think that was an inordinately high number, and we in fact have adopted and are supportive of the U.S. Conference of Mayors lowering that to populations of 50,000 or greater to get direct federal access to funds, and we continue to advocate for that. The other thing I'll mention, and I'm sure this has been, well, we know this, that in St. Louis, this experience has been happening too, as our hospitals have done a great job of gearing up for and getting ready for a surge of COVID patients. Elective surgeries have been canceled. Folks aren't accessing regular health centers and their doctors, and hospitals are struggling as a result of that financially. We know there's been some federal funding that has already come to hospitals in our state, but we think more needs to happen. Sort of in real time, we've been focusing on a very collaborative kind of way of proceeding. We've collaborated with our sister organizations, which you have mirrors of these in St. Louis. Ours are the Civic Council, the Kansas City Area Development Council, and then the Mid-America Regional Council. And one of our efforts there is that we just rolled out last week a Safe Return to KC guidebook. And this guidebook is a comprehensive phased plan for reopening of area businesses. As all of us are aware, both of our communities straddle the state line. And so we have great elected officials that are working to understand how, from a regulatory environment, to declare opening dates and then the phasing of reopening of business. So that, I think of it as two lanes. That's certainly the governmental lane. We're respectful of that lane. Our guide sort of sits in the other side of that lane, which is when we know what those governmental regulations are, how can we as